Okay, if you're looking at this video, it's because you have a 2002 Nissan Pathfinder with four-wheel drive. And you're watching this because you need to replace your starter. So, I am not going to show you bit by bit. There are some other videos that will have some of the information, and it is pretty appropriate. But also because, like a lot of O2 Pathfinders, this does have an oil leak at that second part of the oil pan connection, and I was not about to ruin my phone over it. But here's what I can tell you. I'm going to give you some pertinent information. Number one, there's a video that talks about having to grind back the bolts that are off the front axle mounts. You do not need to do that. You can wiggle it out. There's a guy who has a video on there, and he kind of went over it. But here's the other pertinent information I'm going to tell you. Number one, you're going to need to have extensions and toggle bolts, toggle joints, to be able to get the ground nut loose. Otherwise, you cannot get to it. Another pertinent piece of information: when you jack the car up, jack it up on both sides. My nephew helped me with this one, and we found when we just jacked the right side up, it prevented, and I'm talking just millimeters, but it took away a little bit of the clearance. When we jacked up both sides and suspended both wheels, it definitely added a little bit more. You will want to pull the wheel off just to be able to have that extra room to get in and out. Next point, for whatever reason, in Nissan's infinite wisdom, instead of having both the mounting bolts for the starter face to the rear of the car, the bottom one faces the rear, and you'll see it. It's got the little wiring harness bracket on it, and then the top one actually faces the front of the car, in line with the solenoid and the starter body. So they do go opposite directions if there's any miscuings about this. On the O2 Pathfinder, the top bolt faces front, the bottom bolt faces rear at the bell housing. It's a tight fit, but you can get into it. The other thing I will tell you is when you go to get the starter out, there is a bracket above the starter solenoid that has like a tie down for the wiring harness. I found it easier to disconnect that, whether you actually break the harness or you wiggle the nipple out. It's up to you, but you're going to want that laxity in that wire harness in order to get this thing out. When you do get it loose and you slide the starter, forward towards the front of the car to get it out of the bell housing, and then you start manipulating the starter to slide it over to get it out, pay attention to what you do, because you will need to do the exact opposite to get it positioned correctly. It literally took my nephew and I almost 10 hours on one day and 6 hours on the second day to get it done. Now, part of that was our fault as well. When you go to put the starter back in, make sure the wiring harness with the ground wire does not get pinned between the starter body and the engine, because that's what we did on the first go round of getting it installed. It seemed like it was really tight, and we finally got it snugged in there, and then we realized we had got the wiring harness from the starter ground stuck, and had to loosen it, slide it back out, and get it done. So if you have mechanical skills and you want to give it a shot, it is doable. It will take a lot longer than you think, but I believe that's why if you bring it to a mechanic, they charge a lot more for the four-wheel drive, because that axle's in the way. But I did just want to give you some pointers. Some of the videos don't really just cover that, but you can absolutely do it. You don't have to grind down the bolts on the back side of the axle mounts for the front wheel drive, like one of the videos suggests. Just make sure you have really good lighting. Pay attention to how you take it out so you can make sure you can wiggle it back in. Just pay attention to the position of it when you pull it out of place and how it feels, so when you go to get it back in, you get in that same lineup and orientation. There's also the metal gasket bracket. It may stick to the bell housing, possibly from the years of oil and whatnot. Otherwise, if it comes off, just make sure you get the right orientation, and it will slide over the starter body cylinder that goes into the housing. Anyway, if you're going to do this, give yourself plenty of time, and good luck, because it was not fun, but it definitely saved me a lot of money doing it myself. Thanks.